This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. Well, welcome back to our weekly show. We did take a week off last week. I was away on a family vacation, had a terrific time. If you want to know where I went, you can just check out my social media. I'm at Jody Fisher 70 on Instagram if you want to see where I was. I think there's a little bit on some of the other socials, but the Instagram is the most obvious giveaway as to where I was, as well as what my primary interest was on that trip. So you'll take a look at that and send me a DM or give me a comment on one of those photos to let me know. Excited to be back and working now. We have some great guests that we've lined up for the rest of the summer. We've already got a few in the queue, including today's guest, and we're grateful that he reached out to us because that's what we always encourage people to do, is to reach out to us and book themselves on the PR Podcast. It's trite. We say it every week. We're going to say it again. 52 weeks in a year. That's 52 guests. You should be one of them. If you have a perspective on public relations, the way news gets made, etc., reach out to us in any way that you can. Pitch yourself as a guest, and we'd love to have you on. As long as you have a perspective on what you do in terms of public relations or in terms of the way news gets made, we'd love to hear about it, because this is all about sharing information, building a community, and sharing best practices. So do reach out and make yourself a guest on a future episode of the PR Podcast. Speaking of guests, let's get right to our guest this week. Paul Muolo is a skilled public relations professional with more than 9 years of experience in strategic corporate communications, spanning the healthcare, hospitality, travel, technology, nonprofit, and media sectors. Boy, he does a lot. Sounds a lot like me, actually. With a background in events, journalism, crisis management, social media marketing, and multimedia production. Yes, we all have to wear all those hats every week. He remains committed to building and cultivating positive relationships with media outlets, highlighting corporate cultures, and elevating the awareness and reputation of brands and corporate entities. Paul, welcome to the PR Podcast.
Thanks, Jody. Super thankful to be here. Big fan of all the episodes you're putting out, and just thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Tell us a little bit about you, and tell us a little bit about what you do in public relations and how you got into public relations. You and I have similar paths. It was the sort of the journalism / public relations route.
Yep, totally. So, I was born and raised in Central NJ. I really found my passion for PR in college, studying at Rutgers University. And there, I was really just into networking, into getting as much experience as I could. So started writing for a local newspaper there, based out of the New Brunswick community. And just kind of throughout my college career, just really passionate about studying media, tech, and the like. So, after making a ton of pivots in my career as a result of COVID, I started doing some freelancing in the healthcare space for a short stint, but I eventually landed my current role in corporate communications in a hospitality and property management industry. Now I work as the manager of marketing communications for one of the largest property management and hospitality firms throughout North America and Canada, and grateful enough to have celebrated my 1-year anniversary last week. So super, thankful. But in my current role, I really work on the in-house marketing communications team. Basically, what my company does is they partner with thousands of communities across North America, including low, medium, high-rise condominiums, cooperatives, single-family homes and communities, lifestyle and active adult communities. And really what we do is they rely heavily on the extensive experience that my company offers. We provide resources and local expertise to maximize property value and enhance their residents' lifestyles. And pretty much I'm charged with handling all the social media relations, SEO on the website, among other things. So, it's been quite a journey
That
to
is a
get here,
lot.
but
That is a lot for one person to handle. Now, are you part of a team? Do you have a team
it
working for you,
oh
or is it?
yeah, it is not just me. It is we have a very awesome team. Event specialists, video specialists, designers. So we definitely have a lot of support, and a deep bench of marketing and PR professionals that are really collaborative and really help bring all of our campaigns to life.
That is so great. And I heard in there you're managing both what we'll put in two separate buckets here: external messaging, whether that's public relations, website, social, and corporate communications or internal communications, right? You're doing both there?
Yes, absolutely. So we'll totally do a deeper dive there, but yeah, absolutely. Both fall within my kind of universe, both external facing campaigns and ensuring, associates in the company are very well versed on key updates that are happening, key executives that are kind of shuffling around, getting promoted, things of that nature. So definitely keeping everyone abreast of all the knowledge and company happenings.
We've talked about this in the past on the show, and I have my own opinion about it as well. And that um, in years past, and I'm thinking back maybe even a couple of decades, internal and external communications were sort of two separate things. And more, and this is really a function of digital and how easily messages get pushed through emails, that internal and external communications really are almost one and the same. There might be specific messages that are way in the weeds for an internal audience, but by and large, what you're going to say on the outside is what you want to tell on the inside, and vice versa. Um, for a number of different reasons. Would you agree?
I totally agree. And it's like same thing from a strategic standpoint. You almost want to treat your employees the same way you would treat, your external audiences, right? It's that same level of research, getting to know what motivates them, getting to know how to, meet them where they are and provide appropriate information that will provide value to them, really. So it's, they're two different flavors, but from a strategic and high level like philosophy, same kind of approach there, more or less,
Yeah,
in my humble
absolutely.
opinion, at least.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, I've always said that your internal audience, your employees, your teammates, whoever, however you refer to the people inside the organization, they are your primary ambassadors. They are the people who you want out there telling the corporate story. It's hard enough programming external audience to talk about something in a particular way, especially when you're trying to use your phraseology. And I'm actually dealing with a client right now where we're asking for a correction with a publication because they use a certain phrase in a certain way and it got used in a different way. And it's a little inside baseball, but it's important to them. Right. And so if you don't program your internal audiences, you're never going to have success programming your external ones.
100%. I mean, how are you going to have your message resonate with the public if you're not all aligned and speaking the same language internally? So I couldn't agree more.
What about sort of your day to day? We want to segue a little bit about public relations and specifically earned media, but let's widen the filter a little bit there too.
Sure.
How do you and your team typically define public relations in your day to day and what you do?
How do we define public relations? Well, really, it's about building trust, authenticity, building the authority in the space, leveraging your thought leaders to really, you know, more and more you see people, I don't want to say trust brands less and less, but people want to buy from people. So what we do is essentially leverage our subject matter experts to pretty much amplify the idea that, hey, we know what we're doing. We've been doing this for, you know, so many years. You can trust us handling your property. And that's kind of what we want to instill um, from a media relations standpoint when, collaborating with journalists, and, peppering that tone of voice into press releases and on the website and all of our own and shared channels. So it's really just comes down to building trust, building that authority, um, and highlighting how we're the leader in the field, and um, that they can be safe partnering with us, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, and building that trust is really a long game, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not done in an afternoon or a single press release or a blog story or a social media post. It is done over the course of, and this goes back to the core of what public relations is, and especially earned media. It's done over the span of months, literally months, if not years. It is not something that you can turn on and off like a light switch. You don't get one even if you get one great story, right? That's not the end of it. You even take that
Unfortunately
story, you
not.
merchandise that, and then you got to get another one and another one and another, and in a bunch of different places. I'm working with a client right now, in fact, where we're at that point where we're launching the product that we've been waiting a year to launch, and we're able to point backward. And all we've been doing is an educational campaign with reporters for the last 12
Hmm.
months. And we've got, a small, really, in the grand scheme of things, a small number of articles that are out there in the space. But now that the product is launching, those articles will be popping up with journalists who are saying, "Oh, you launched this product. Let me go back." And there's the evidence. There's the breadcrumbs
Yep.
that sort of walk up to it. Would you agree?
I totally agree. It's cliche, but it really is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and it's like, you can kind of liken it to a snowball, right? Like everyone's like, oh, okay, we'll hire this PR team. We'll get on the front page of the New York Times. Sometimes it can work like that, but ultimately it's about just building that momentum and maximizing your coverage, right? So a lot of, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, but um, and I'm also guilty of making this mistake, but a lot of the times I see, uh, not people not getting the most out of their press coverage, right? So like we landed the story. Now what? What do we do? Is it just going to stay out there, or can we add it to our online newsroom? Do you have an online newsroom? Can we boost the article on social to reach more people? Anything you can do to get as much mileage out of that placement will really go a long way. And obviously, it always ties back to your objectives. But as long as you're doing something to continue to build off of that momentum, once you have that earned media, um, that'll pay dividends in the long run.
And there's where all the other things that you are in charge of at your company start to come up, whether that's website, social, SEO, incredibly
Hmm.
important. I think it's a very overused. Everybody talks about SEO, but what is it actually, right? You can control so much of it, and you can maybe control is the wrong word, but direct perhaps. So
Hmm.
much of what people find online with an effective SEO program. Have you done that with, let's say, earned media or anything else that you put on your company's website?
So for us, it's really, you know, as opposed to having the author be an admin, like the anonymous admin on the blog, it's like, okay, this is actually from a real person. This was penned by a real person, and a real thought leader, and who's an expert in the space. So when it comes to SEO, and again, I'm still learning constantly about this stuff, and my company
Well,
has
every
an
time we learn it, they
amazing.
change it on us. So it's
I know. It is so frustrating. It's like you can't keep up with Google's SERP changes. You really can't. But I think in its simplest form, SEO really is just is about the intent. Um, a lot of the time, some of the feedback is, well, our competitors are ranking higher than us. Why is that? We're putting out the same thing. Well, they're it's just all about how people search, right? So if you're really hyper focused on the intent of an article, and I'm talking owned, like our owned media, earned, we have not really. It's on the roadmap, but we haven't really integrated that as part, or at least in my region, as part of a long term kind of component of our strategy. Um, but just really focusing on the intent, trying to get into the mindset of your audience, and what at the end of the day, what keywords or triggers will provide the most value, to help you kind of rank higher, right? So it's all about the intent.
you used a terrific phrase there, roadmap, or it's in the plan. And I find that a, what is very easily overlooked in a PR plan is the strategy, is the roadmap, right? And the sort of the what we're going to do, because people get so hyper focused from the jump on we need to be in the New York Times or fill in your media outlet,
Hmm.
right? And they're
Hmm.
so hyper focused on the result, on the end of the journey, that they forget what gets them there. And they also probably run at 90 miles an hour over all the other opportunities they could have along the path that they just miss because they need to be in that thing to cut it out and hang it on their wall in a frame. Um,
Right.
Chime in a little bit there about, sort of how you think about strategy, how you work with your team about strategy, and how you communicate that to the people who aren't in our space, who need to understand why you're doing what you're doing.
Right. I mean, the biggest thing, honestly, I've come across this so many times in my career. I've worked a little. I've mainly worked as an in-house corporate communicator, but it's always about setting expectations. As long as you're tying your placements back to a brand narrative, and your objectives, and really have the marketing execs that you're reporting to or collaborating with understand that, hey, this is a long game. We kind of have to build up to this. And I would rather reach people in industry pubs at first, especially as you're just kind of starting out, um, first, and then build, kind of build up to that. And the thing of it is like you said it perfectly, breadcrumbs, right? Like, you can use your, I don't want to say smaller placements, but it's really about the quality of the placement. You can use that for additional pitching as you kind of work your way up this
I
earned
call it the
media
walk
ladder,
up.
so to
Yeah,
speak.
absolutely.
The walk up, that's a
Yep.
great, I've been thinking about what to call that, but that's a great term for it. Definitely better than my analogy, snowball. So
You can have it.
that's been done.
Everything on
I
the
like the
PR
walk up.
podcast is public domain. 'Cause
I
it's
love
true.
it.
I mean, and let's use the example of the New York Times reporter, right? If you pitch a reporter at the New York Times, and I'm just using them as an example because they're the one that
Of
everybody goes,
course.
that's the big one.
Right.
But if you pitch someone at that level, and what's the first thing they do? They Google. If they don't find anything, you're not real.
Hmm.
You're not real yet.
Exactly.
Unless you're shot out of a cannon somewhere, there's some other crazy thing that's going on that compels them to report. They got plenty of
Hmm.
other stories they can do with people with companies that they can research and they can find information on. And let's be honest, people who are reporting at that level, at that tier, they're not interested in telling your story out of the kindness of their heart, and they don't get paid to do fluff, right?
Right.
They want to peel back the layers and find out what you're all about and write something that is original and unique. And it's not gotcha. It's writing something
Hmm.
that is interesting to their audience. So yeah, the walk, I always use the walk up to describe that
The
to
walk up.
the clients. And it gets them what I find that it gets them what they need along the path, right? And that's where we come back to the strategy, which is what we started talking about.
Right. I mean, I think the walk up is a great way to frame it. It just kind of goes back to the expectations I was talking about it. I mean, that is a great way to just highlight that roadmap. And it's like, yes, we can get there, but we kind of have to, crawl before we can walk, and so on. So yeah, I totally love it and completely agree.
Thank you. Let's pivot back to something that you said that was awesome earlier, which is people want to buy from people. Let's talk about
Hmm.
humanizing what we do,
Yeah.
right? And I've said this frequently as well, that every story is about a person. It's not about a company. It can be about a company, but it's about the person at the company, right? It's about
Right.
stories get written about people. Why do you think that it's important to be humanizing your brand or the company that you're working with?
People respond to people. It's that simple. Human connection is what matters. There's research that shows people are trusting brands less and less. They're looking to buy from other people. They're looking to buy from brands that their friend told them about and that they've used, right? So what I always like to suggest is, or test, at least steering away from some of that robotic, jargon, marketing language, and just be human. Just be kind of down to earth, right? It comes back to the the blog on our website? Like, who is admin, right? Or is this our VP of marketing that's talking about how to streamline your HOA property management, like marketing strategy? Lack of transparency and authenticity just isn't going to cut it anymore. Your audience only wants to understand the why behind what your brand is doing. They also want to get to know your brand itself and the people behind it. So the more and more you can highlight your employees, monthly spotlights of your associates, like with quotes, little graphics, right? Yeah, and getting your CEO active on LinkedIn. And I'm not talking about just posting a really good question on LinkedIn and then forgetting about it and not responding to all the great comments. I'm talking about actively, thoughtfully engaging with the commenters, right? So it's just kind of one of those things we're seeing trend more and more. At least I am. And after the year that we had, people just want to hear the human side, and they want to kind of, in my opinion, I think sometimes they can see through the marketing mumbo jumbo, if you will. So that's just my 2 cents on the
Absolutely.
matter.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And while we're on the topic of LinkedIn there, you talk about if you write a blog, posting, okay, fine, posting it. I also encourage my clients to publish it as well. And there's a difference between posting and publishing. And I think very few people who are casual users of LinkedIn, who maybe still think it's just a place to keep your online resume, don't get the value of publishing versus posting. And they need to do that, and we won't go down the rabbit hole on publishing right here, but
Yeah.
just if you're on LinkedIn, check it out. If you write something, you should be publishing it as well as posting it.
Absolutely. And couldn't agree more. Like, it's all about recycling the content.
Yeah. We were talking about some wins here, but let's talk about, and you wanted to talk about maybe some mistakes or pitfalls of PR. What are some of the things that come to your mind that people maybe need to watch out for, or maybe even things that you've done and you've learned from and said, oh, I'm never going to do that one again?
Yeah, I mean, I added this question in there mainly because I have a lot of experience. I can speak in great length of, I don't want to call them mistakes. I'll call them learning.
We all have these. I mean, if we don't have these, we haven't been doing anything. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So not tailoring your pitches is probably number one. I mean, I can't tell you how many times. And again, it's just, picking up the phone, cold calling a journalist. They don't want to hear it. They are on deadline. So just really tailoring your pitches, getting to know, building that rapport first before you just go ahead and say, hey, we just launched a product. They're human. And sometimes you can liken cold pitching to asking a stranger on the street to do something for you. So hey, can you just do me a favor? That's number one. I'd say the next mistake I've made and that people could kind of watch out for, which we kind of already talked about, is just not getting the most mileage out of your press coverage. You've landed an awesome spot. You've earned an awesome award. Add it to your careers page. Like, highlight your culture, highlight the amazing, attract that top talent, right? So that's another one. And then I guess my third and final would be just falling short with follow-up, which I am still guilty of all the time. It makes it really hard to follow up if you don't keep yourself accountable. You don't have a process or Google spreadsheet. There's tons of task management tools out there. Just to stay organized, say, okay, I tweeted at this reporter last Wednesday. Maybe I'll shoot him an email, follow up just to see if he's is still open to a story idea. So just being mindful about follow up.
Absolutely. I think that follow-up piece is probably the most important. It's also the hardest thing for us to do because we are juggling so many things. There's so much going on. I mean, we could spend all day long, or maybe at least every, afternoon, just on follow-up on the stuff that we're sending out. But it can't be said enough. And I think the reason it can't be said enough is because reporters are busier than ever. They are probably doing the jobs of the people who used to sit to the left and right of them, who have left because the newsroom's been decimated. And you got to make it easy for them to pull the trigger on the story that you want them to write. And that doesn't mean they're just going to print your press release, but you're asking them to donate their time, their talent, their ink, their digital space, their
Mhm.
whatever their resource is. You're asking them to do that. Don't make it hard for them to do it.
Right.
And it's just as important, I think, to not overburden them with information. I mean, you can send them an email with 17 attachments and 14 JPEGs and a link to a video, and that's just overwhelming. You got to make it
Yes,
streamlined.
absolutely. I had a guy, a reporter, get back to me. He said, "Yeah, I'm absolutely open to pitches. I always like to ask before I send the pitch." And people they appreciate that, right? But he's like, I'm booked for the summer. Circle back around Labor Day. So made that note in my spreadsheet, and that's what we're gonna do.
There you go. And on to the next thing. You got something to do, got something to do in September.
Absolutely.
Did you also
It's
want
about
to
the long game.
about some of the top social media trends? You know, we talked about this earlier. Social media is constantly changing. It is shifting sand under the feet. You know, what are some of your favorite social media platforms, and what are some of the things that you see happening in the space?
I'm a big Instagram guy. I love how it's constantly evolving. And Twitter as well. Like, hey, that's how you and I connected, right? Twitter, from a networking standpoint, is there's such an area of opportunity there. So definitely hop on Twitter if you prioritize networking. I'd say one trend is that the content value will beat the production quality in 2021. So it's really not about like overthinking. It doesn't have to be a huge production. You don't have to buy, $5,000 cameras and all this audio gear. Sometimes authentic beats that. Yeah, exactly. You got the phone. He's holding the phone up.
Everybody has a broadcast quality camera in their pocket.
100%, and that's it. And that's real. And you know what, and it comes back to that human element. The more if you're not overproducing things, it just makes it more like true, or authentic. So I'd say, just not brands are going to not overthink the production quality, and just kind of create content, churning content, being those content factories. And kind of in the same breath, I think we'll also see kind of a less is more strategic philosophy when you specifically for like organic. So, and it just kind of comes back, to this year we all endured, but just being really thoughtful. Does my audience always need to hear from us? Question mark. Like, maybe not. Like, let's think about that. And let's really just be very thoughtful about the causes we're posting about. Does this make sense to post at this time? Just being more mindful about it, instead of just, hitting schedule on your social media, and just kind of scheduling, content just for the sake of, it's like you don't just have a meeting to have a meeting, right? It's like, just being more thoughtful about it. And, I think the last trend I would want to highlight is just the short form, micro, bite-sized content that we're seeing. You have the rise of Instagram Reels and TikTok, and I just think that we have to be mindful of people's time, the increasingly lack of time that people are experiencing. In my opinion, I feel like they're just more likely to digest content in smaller doses, right? And then it'll, like stories, for example, just disappear and it's gone, right? It's about the experience in the moment. So that's the last trend I would probably highlight. But
those are
there's
definitely
a million out there.
Oh yeah, and next week we'll have 5 more, right? I mean, it's just
absolutely.
like I said, sand under the feet, constantly shifting.
Absolutely.
But I agree with you on that. I especially agree with you on the just do it kind of thing. And that sounds very Gary Vaynerchuk, but it's like, don't think too hard about it. Just do it. Just do one and then do the next one. And I'll point right back at myself with this podcast. I did the first one. I thought about it for more than a year. And finally I just said, the heck with it. And I just turned it on one day and I just talked into the microphone for 10 minutes. You can go back and you can listen to that first one. It sounds awful.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It was the first one. And you just keep moving, you keep growing, and just you get there. And because your first thing out is not going to land with a gigantic splash, right? No, probably nobody's going to see it.
Yeah,
That's okay.
exactly.
Everyone's allowed to practice, and that goes back to what you talked about humanizing. You don't be afraid to be human out there.
Yes, exactly. It's a consistency. It's totally a consistency game. And now look at you now. It's like, 50 plus episodes
Oh,
later,
Mom
and you're
is
off
so
the
proud
races.
of me.
Oh man.
Too much. Well, this has been a great conversation, Paul. Let's segue now into the rapid fire question portion of our podcast. And this is where
Let's
we
do
steal
it.
a page from the Inside the Actor studio and we ask a series of rapid fire questions. You know the drill. You've been a listener, so let's begin. Rapid fire question number 1. What is your favorite news source?
I gotta go with the news subreddit on Reddit. Twitter's cool too.
Wow, that's a good one. We haven't heard that one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Favorite rapid fire question number 2, your favorite social media platform?
I'm a big Instagram guy. I love Instagram. So that is definitely my number 1.
Very cool. Rapid fire question number 3, coffee or alcohol?
I'm made of coffee pretty much. I love coffee, although I do enjoy local craft beers on the weekend. So that is, that's good too.
Very good. All right. Rapid fire question number 4. What is your favorite on the run food?
It's terrible, but I gotta go Taco Bell. It's
the drive-thru, right?
Yeah, the drive-thru. Exactly. It gets me every time.
My son will meet you there. Rapid fire question number 5. What do you want to be after you finish this career?
Oh, I love that question. I love to teach public relations or media studies or media literacy in a college setting. I feel like that would be so fun to help kind of younger people who are interested in the field, like advance. So I think that would be really cool.
That's great. Paying it forward. That sounds awesome. Well, Paul, this has been a great conversation. Please let people know how they can find you online.
Sure. You can find me on my website. It's pmuolo.wixsite.com/MKTG. My email is prmuolo@gmail.com. And my social media, you can pretty much search at PR Muolo on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I'm on pretty much everything. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right. We will definitely look you up and get more connected as we go. Thanks again, Paul. We appreciate your time today. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The PR Podcast, and send us a question or a comment. Our intro is by Christopher Appold. You can find him and his fantastic photography on Instagram at Christopher_APPOLDT. Check him out there and hire him for all your photography needs. You can find me online at Jody Fisher on all the socials and online at jodyfisherpr.com. We'll see you next time on the PR Podcast.